Chapter 3. The word famous is seldom used to describe mathematical concepts. There are a few exceptions. Einstein's equation from the special theory of relativity, E equals mc squared, is rightly regarded as famous. The golden ratio might be called famous, although the number of people who have heard of it is far larger than the number who can state its numerical value. Even fewer can state its algebraic expression. Thus, non-mathematicians are usually hard-pressed to recognize a famous mathematical idea, even when the hints are liberally provided. So it was in this case. A sawed-off golf club? Peller almost laughed. Almost. He held the latest note from Leo, as they had begun to call him, by the corner of the evidence bag. God, but his work had become bizarre of late. Montefiore pulled a chair over to Peller's desk. He must have cut it off to carry it concealed under his coat. I suppose it would look a bit odd, gallivanting around town with a 9-iron in hand. And of course, once people started hearing about the attacks, anyone doing so would immediately be bound, gagged, and left on our doorstep. Eric Dumas sauntered into the conversation, casually flipping a quarter with his right hand. As Peller watched, Dumas gradually increased the height of each toss until he achieved an impressive amplitude of about 3 feet without a miss. From what we know so far, Dumas said, he's something of a magician. Nobody sees him coming, nobody hears him coming, then bam! He caught the coin with a swipe of the hand that nearly connected with Montefiore's nose. She glowered at him, so he walks quietly. More than that, Dumas said. He times his approach just right, when his victim's attention is fixed on something else, like this. He curled his fingers around the quarter, held up his hand and blew on it. When he opened his fingers, again, the quarter was gone. Impressed, Montefiore looked to his left hand dangling by his side. He brought it up and opened it, empty. "Where is it?" she asked. "In your left trouser pocket," Peller said without expression. Dumas looked like he'd just bitten a lemon. So much for misdirection. It just needs rehearsal. Unfortunately, the mad golfer is little more than a nuisance at the moment. He dropped the letter on the desk and tapped it. Leo wants to kill somebody. Again. Or already has, Montefiore added. Dumas pulled the quarter from his pocket and scowled at it accusingly, as though it had ruined his trick. "No new homicides reported yet," he said. "Wait a minute." "Yes," Peller said, deadpan. "It really is the same quarter." "Exactly, I mean, it could be. What if Leo is the mad golfer?" Montefiore looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. "No, seriously," Dumas continued. "How likely is it we'd have 2 nutcases running around at the same time?" "It happens," Peller said. "There isn't anything to connect the 2 cases aside from their weirdness. And the thought that's gone into the crimes." "True, but the golfer is after money," Montefiore objected. "Leo looks like a serial killer." Peller looked away. "Don't even think that," he said. But that specter had already taken up residence in his own mind, and silence wouldn't banish it. Most murders were ghosts of yesterday merely awaiting exorcism. Serial killings were ghosts lurking in the shadows of tomorrow, intent on transforming morning into darkest night. Montefiore said nothing. Dumas studied his quarter in silence for a few moments, then half-heartedly repeated the disappearing quarter trick. In spite of the gloom that had settled over them, this time he pocketed the coin flawlessly. "Misdirection," he said, continuing his previous line of thought. "He gives us something to think about other than what he's really up to. We're getting ahead of ourselves, Peller said. We don't have many facts in either case. But point taken, Eric. It could be one person behind both crime sprees. Something to keep in mind, perhaps. Dumas finished the thought for him. But not to run with just yet. Agreed. He tried the coin trick one last time. And the quarter fell to the floor with the unconvincing clatter of base metal. Montefiore drew the task of visiting Maggie Patterson, widow of Mark Patterson, mother of Mandy and Mark Jr. Montefiore wondered why people would inflict identical initials upon their children. At least they weren't like some she'd encountered in her law enforcement career. Truly bizarre appellations bestowed by aging hippies or drug addicts. She recruited one of her junior underlings, Detective Teresa Swan, to accompany her, and the pair arrived at the Patterson home just after 3 o'clock. As Montefiore rang the doorbell of the white and sky blue bungalow surrounded by incongruously large maples and oaks, Detective Swan shifted nervously. I've never done a murder investigation before, she said quietly. Don't worry, Montefiore reassured her. I'll ask the questions. Well, most of them. Chime in if you think I'm overlooking something. But otherwise, focus on observing and taking notes. When Patterson opened the door, she proved to be a tall, lanky blonde with a corpse-like face. Thin, bony, creased, and expressionless. Montefiore guessed this wasn't her normal look, but one she'd be wearing for some time to come. Her husband, after all, had been shot to death on the job. All he did was drive a snowplow. Of all the stupid ways to die, Montefiore thought. She introduced herself and Swan and asked if they might come in. Patterson motioned them in with a slight nod. Inside, Montefiore found the living room to be small and simple, but comfortable enough. The furniture was old and a bit worn, but clean, upholstered in red and yellow floral patterns. A grandfather clock that appeared to be a genuine heirloom ticked off seconds at one end of the room. A modest TV quietly occupied the other. The detectives and their host sat on opposite sides of a mission-style coffee table, whose cherry finish suggested it was newer than the rest of the furnishings. I know it sounds like a platitude, Montefiore began, but we want you to know how very sorry we are for your loss. We're doing everything we can to find out who killed your husband and bring him to justice. Patterson cupped her chin in her hands. I know you are. I have a cousin with the police down in Richmond. Anything I can do to help, just let me know. I guess the first thing is if you know of anyone who might have wanted Mark dead. No. Oh, there were people who didn't like him very much. He was opinionated and not always polite. But I can't see anyone hating him that much. Opinionated how? Every way. She actually chuckled, and her face lit up for a moment. But the light slipped away as quickly as it had come. He thought most everyone was a moron in some way or another. He didn't much like politicians, lawyers, doctors, police. She said the last a bit hesitantly, then continued. Priests, ministers, and rabbis. He thought our minister was a dunce. He only went to church because of me, I think. What church do you attend? Columbia Presbyterian. It's a bit of a drive, but it was the church I went to when I was little. Montefiore and Swan exchanged glances. Was this coincidence, or something more? Maybe Dumas was onto something after all. What is it? Patterson asked. Probably nothing. It's just there was an incident at that church earlier today. I expect you'll hear about it before too long. Patterson didn't seem too interested. She gazed out the window at the melting snow, not really looking, perhaps only waiting for something that would never happen again. Who would have known Mark would have been plowing that area? Montefiore asked. And how far in advance would they have known it? I'm not sure. I never asked him much about that job, and he didn't talk about it much. He only did it to make some extra money over the winter. He was really a carpenter, but work is always slow this time of year, and with the economy as bad as it's been, even the busy seasons haven't been too busy. Probably only the people he works with would have known. Was there a routine? Not really, Patterson replied. He'd get a call when they wanted him to report in. You'd know the call was coming if you paid attention to the weather reports. He got the call about 4 in the afternoon the day before he was killed. The snow started later that evening. I guess he would have been out there all night, but I couldn't tell you where he worked or when he took breaks or anything like that. She leaned back into the sofa and exhaled heavily. I don't think anyone wanted him dead, she said. It came out more forcefully than anything else she had said, which wasn't saying much, but suggested that she really wanted to believe it. Montefiore pondered this for a moment, perhaps for too long, because Swan quietly asked the obvious question. Then why was he shot? Patterson shrugged. Because he was there? Wrong place, wrong time? It's a busy road. It could have been anyone. Not just then, Swan replied. Very few people were out and about. Patterson slowly shifted her gaze to Swan, to Montefiore, back to Swan. Except for the plows, she said.